Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here, coming at you from the Knife Center, and welcome to Knife AQ, episode number 91. This is the knife series where I answer all of your questions, whether they are sharp or dull. And this week, amongst our questions, we are talking about some wedding carry knives, some nice classy stuff. We're taking a look at some powder steels, which ones are the easiest to live with day to day, and that is just a couple of what we're going to take a look at. So, let's get into it. All right, if you're new to this series, here's the deal. I sit here and I answer some questions that we've pulled out from the comments section below these videos. Thomas is there behind the camera and cracks wise a little bit. And if you want a chance to have one of your questions featured in a future episode, just leave it down below in that comments section. First question today comes from Andrew Bradshaw. Hey DCA, I'm looking for a knife to carry at my wedding in October. I'm having trouble narrowing it down. I'm looking for something classy that will hide easily in a suit pocket, so nothing large, preferably blue, but nice pack of wood could look nice with the blue suit. The budget is $100 to $200. A blue-handled Ultratech caught my eye, but it's a little out of the budget, and I prefer a folder. Any suggestions? I certainly do. Of course, you folks know we have a nice series of Packwood exclusives with Spyderco. You mentioned that as a possibility. But I think I have one better than this Indela right here. Not that it's not a good knife, but something else really struck out to me as a possible option. You mentioned an Ultratech, and I should have pulled one here as an example. But the OTF's not for you. You want a folder, you want something blue, classy. I'm going to come in just above your price point a little bit. I mean, I'm talking about just above. And something that's going to give you a little bit of OTF vibes. How about the MKM Flame with the dagger profile? $215, so just above. But I wanted you to see this. We've got a blue titanium handle on this one. Nice and contoured. It has a very nice feel in the hand. It's just kind of a classic profile in a way without being, an actual classic profile. Just something nice and highly refined about it. Milled pocket clip, frame lock, ball bearings in the pivot. M390 blade comes in about 2.8 inches. This is a classy knife. Maybe even classier if you go with the standard blade and not the dagger blade. But I wanted you to feel happy about not getting that OTF. Gives you a little bit of that going on. M390 steel, good stuff, good flipping action, and you got the blue color you want. Really nicely made in Italy, fantastic. This is just half of the equation, however, because if you were to purchase this knife, this would give you an opportunity for a great knife as a gift for your groomsmen if you were leaning that way. And you could get them the CRKT Compact from CRKT and Richard Rogers, of course. $45 for these, and you've got something that's gonna go really in a really complementary fashion to your knife, the MKM Flame here up top. That'd be pretty special. All the groomsmen showing up with this, and then you've got the kind of Mac Daddy to lord over all of their less expensive knives, which is not to say they're cheap knives. I mean, they feel very good. The handles here are synthetic. They're injection molded, but they don't look it or feel it. They look more like aluminum than you might think. It goes really nicely next to that MKM, I dare say. Deep carry pocket clip on the CRKT as well, reversible. 4116 stainless steel, I think. Yep, that's correct. Which, if your groomsmen aren't knife guys, they're not gonna know that that's a fairly inexpensive steel, so all the better. And then they've got a nice, classy knife to carry at your wedding and beyond. So that would be my suggestion. Check out those folks right there. And if not, maybe something like that Indela I showed you right before I pulled this up. Congratulations, by the way, sir. Happy for you. Next question comes from Graham Blackall. My question is, which powdered steel is closest to 1095? I can get a screaming edge on my Case CV blades and wondered what kind of improvement there would be in edge retention with a PM process. So in all likelihood, there would be probably no real improvement if they were to make a powder version of 1095, a powder metallurgy version of 1095. I'll get to that in a minute. Interestingly, they do make a powdered 1095 that you can buy from knife making supply places, but that's more used for making Damascus billets, not for the actual PM process, the powder metallurgy process. So a little bit of a different thing there. And the reason powder metallurgy originally got applied to knife steels or tool steels more specifically is it allowed them to do more complex alloys that if made traditionally, at the rate it cooled, the carbides and the structure that these steels would form would be not nearly strong enough for the applications they were going for. You'd have all kinds of grain growth and carbides, way bigger than you would want them. I'm probably simplifying things here a bit, but that's the general purpose of powder metallurgy, is because they can create those tiny droplets that cool nearly instantly, basically, so they can control the growth of things like those carbides. Stuff like 1095 already has, small, minimal carbides, and the powder metallurgy process is not going to improve that any. It's already, it's already living its best life as a traditional ingot steel. So even though you're not going to find an equivalent, Seth and I put our heads together. We're thinking, like, what is the easiest powder steel to sharpen? If that's what you're going for, stuff like the classic case blades, they're carbon steel, which depending on when it's made might be more like 1095 or more like 1085. They've kind of changed things up over the years, but it all lives under their CV moniker. Super easy to sharpen, super easy to get a real fine edge as well, which if that's the characteristic you're going for, you typically don't need powder metallurgy for the same reasons I described earlier. But we think the answer is going to be RPM 9, which is a fairly, quite new powder metal steel, proprietary to Artisan Cutlery and CJRB, like you see on this exclusive RIA right here. Actually, let's back up to our wedding folk right here. This could be a good combo for a classy Grooms carry and a less expensive Groomsmen carry gift right there. Yeah. As an aside, because we've got packwood handles here as well. Price on this knife is $55 right now, so quite affordable. Cheaper versions of this knife come with a 12C27, which is a very easy to sharpen stainless non-powder metal steel. But anyway, I got into the weeds, didn't I?
Yeah.
Let me take a track back to the main path here, folks. But something like RPM 9 is not the edge-holdiest or the toughest powder metal steel, but it is one of the least, one of the ones you can get without spending a whole lot of money. Like I said, $55 for this knife. I think they've got knives even less money than this with this steel, with less fancy handles. And it holds an edge pretty decently. They've described it as something kind of akin to the target. Essentially is they're shooting for edge retention like D2, but easier to sharpen. Is this going to be as easy to sharpen as 1085? Probably not. I would have to do them head to head just to get like a the true feel like today, but the 1085 is going to be even easier still to sharpen. But if you want to try powder metal, but you want to stay as close as you can to the experience of your steels, if not the actual chemical makeup, then maybe something like this could be a good try. All right, next up, Colton Lindberg. Hey DCA, what qualities make a knife sharp? Is it steel, edge geometry, or grind? I want to get a new knife that can get crazy sharp. Any recommendations? $75 to $100, thank you. What makes a knife sharp ultimately is you and how good you are at sharpening it. There are some things that you can kind of stack the deck in your favor, however, to give yourself an easier job. And one of the things is something we just talked about when we talked about 1095 and stuff like that. Go for something that's easier to sharpen. You're gonna, with the same amount of effort, you're gonna be able to get that sharper than K390 or S90V or something like that, because those take more work. So if you spent the same amount of time, let's say you're gonna need a half hour to sharpen S90V, and you're gonna do it, it's gonna get nice and sharp. But if you spent that same half an hour doing something like 1095, 15 minutes in, you'd realize you're already as good as you can get, and it's going to be sharper probably than the S90V. Again, all depends on what you're good at. But yeah, stack the deck in your favor, and easy to sharpen steel. Thin grinds, maybe thin hollow grinds especially, where the thickness behind the edge itself is kept nice and narrow, because you're going to be fighting less material right behind the edge, and it's going to feel sharper. Some will say even something like a Scandi grind with a 12-degree bevel on each side is going to feel sharper, and yes, it will, but you're going to start fighting a bit of that shoulder as you're pushing through material. So that's the trade-off, which is why I recommend something with a thin hollow grind. Maybe something like this Civivi Elementum with green micarta handles in this case, priced at $66, so even less than what you were looking for. But I still think the quality is up there with a $75 to $100 range. With this, we have Sandvik's 14C28N stainless steel. Fantastic stuff. It's very fine-grained. It can take a very refined, a very high-polished edge, essentially, very, very easily because the carbides in this are fairly small. When you combine it with Civivi's kind of build quality, they do really thin edges and really nice hollow grinds. So you've got that going for you in this case as well. Easy to sharpen steel, less steel to bother with in the actual sharpening because the edge is thin, and less material behind the edge, which is going to enhance that feeling of sharpness. But again, ultimately, it comes down to practice. It comes down to knowing your sharpening rig, and the amount you put into it is what you're going to get out on the other side. All right, next question comes from Forrest Ferris. DCA, Thomas, anybody? Let's go grab Gary or something. Anybody?
Matt D.
Ooh, that'd be fun. You guys don't even know. Anyway, I need help picking a new knife for my seasonal job at a farmer's market coming up in the next couple of weeks. The main cutting tasks will be breaking down wax-coated boxes, opening plastic burlap chili bags, and slicing fruit and veggies to eat and show to customers. The only things required are a truly stainless blade, finger-safe lock type, and less than 3.5 inches as per state ordinance. I'm also a lefty and not fond of serrations, just to make things more difficult. Cheaper the better. Thanks to any knife nuts who can answer the call. This is one of those needle in the haystack requirements. And we get some number of these in the comments section, and unfortunately I don't always have as much time to devote to the hunt for answers in these cases as I would like, because especially one like this, it takes a bit of thinking, it takes a bit of digging. But let's break it down. So utility and food prep in one, 3.5-inch blade, finger safe lock, so keeping your fingers out of the blade path as you close it, truly stainless, and lefty. That's the one right there that really threw this one for a curve. And the length a little bit too, because in my mind, kind of the perfect answer for this, also the expense, you said you wanted cheaper than possible. The Spyderco Caribbean would be a great option. It's $217 and change, so it's not cheap. 3.7 inches, so it's too big. LC200N, truly stainless, great stuff there. Whether you go with the sheep's foot or the drop point, both would work pretty well in your case. We've also got the compression lock there at the back, which is finger safe, but they don't make a lefty version of the Caribbean, unfortunately. The bright coloration here would work well in a farmer's market as well. It's less tactical seeming. But that's not the right answer, unfortunately. The knife we just looked at may seem to be a good option, that being the Civivi Elementum. 3.5 inches, finger safe lock. It's not left-hand biased, but the button lock here is still very easy to use one-handed, no problem. Truly stainless, 14C28N, which was actually originally produced by Sandvik, I believe at Kershaw's request, to make a more stainless version of 13C26, which is still a great steel, but can discolor a little bit. So, very, very truly stainless. The reason I would not go with this in particular knife is because you're talking about fruits and veggies, fruits especially. And there's something that scares me about working all day in a farmer's market where you might not have the facilities to clean this blade as thoroughly as you might need to when sticky fruit juices and such get into the pivot here, and we're dealing with a ball bearing pivot. I don't like that, especially for if you want to keep things food safe and sanitary, which if you're serving food to customers, I hope you are. For that reason, I would, one, avoid ball bearings, but I would also think about splitting this up into two knives. The knife that you carry, the pocket knife that could pull duty as that food slicer if you need to, but you're dealing with a farmer's market, and chances are, I know you have a 3.5-inch blade length limit, but kitchen knives, I'm sure, are not going to be an issue. This is not legal advice, of course, but you're working in a food service establishment. Throw yourself down a cutting board and get a commercial kitchen grade kitchen knife. Whether it's a small paring knife like this Victorinox, this is part of their, what's the name of it? The Modern collection, sorry. $7. You got a 4-inch blade here, but you could get like 6-inch chef knives if you want, a slightly bigger slicer, whatever's gonna help you, do your job in commercial food preparation right there. I don't think you're gonna have a problem with that. $7 right here, leave that at the stand with a cutting board. That should be what you use for the customer's food on the regular. Easy enough to keep clean, no pivots to worry about, that sort of thing. Which we still got to get to the utility knife you need that can pull double duty into the food prep world. So all the requirements you mentioned, I'm going to throw the extra one in there, no ball bearing pivots. And the best I can think right now is this, the Gerber Sedulo. It's fairly new on the wider market, but it's pretty darn good. $125. That's the one caveat with what you're looking for with a finger safe lock, because we have a crossbar lock here, which works great. You've got washers in the pivot, no ball bearings. You've got a full flat grind here with S30V steel, 3.4 inches. So right about maxed out as to what you can get. If you're looking for a less expensive finger safe lock, there's stuff, like these button locks, but most of those have ball bearings. As far as other crossbar locks, the SOG Terminus is a good knife, but you're dealing with D2 steel for the less expensive ones. And if you spring for the S35, it's a little more money. And it's also a 3-inch blade, which isn't going to be the best for food prep. Gerber Sumo would seem to be a good choice, but it's got a bigger than 3.5-inch blade as well. So if you want that true finger safeness and everything else that we talked about, this I think is the least expensive option. Be a very good option and be an option you could carry well beyond just the farmer's market gig. If you got to have something that is less expensive, I completely understand. And what I would do is compromise a little bit on the finger safe nature and go with a Bird Harrier 2 by Spyderco. $34. Thin, slicey blade. It's got the same things we like about a lot of Spyderco blades for food prep, full flat grind. Going to be a great thing for that. Washers in the pivot, of course, no ball bearings here. Lock back. This might be a little bit harder to keep clean than something that's open backed, like that Sedulo, or mostly open backed, I should say. But this could do the job really well. It's utilitarian. It's got the sliciness you need. And while it's not finger safe, there are ways to close this very deliberately that you're not going to have to worry about, kind of hitting yourself, even if you're doing it one-handed like that. I like to use my thumb on the lock back and use my index finger to kind of start closing the blade, reorient, close the rest of the way. This is completely the opposite of finger safe, but there's even folks who like to use that choil to actuate the lock with a thumb, drop that blade, and you actually use your finger, deliberately put your finger in the path. This is a method I typically and still do not recommend because it's easy to get in bad habits and do that with a knife that doesn't have a safe choil like that.
We've seen that before.
We've seen that happen on camera with some friends of ours, in fact.
When you need it, a backlock is tough to beat.
Yeah.
When this thing comes open, it opens.
It's ready to go.
Oh, man.
Oh, no.
Yep.
First spider bite of the day.
So this one, it's funny I just did that. When all,
but it's out there, so figured I'd mention it at least, even if, again, I don't really recommend getting in the habit of doing that. But this is a really good knife for all your needs. It's completely ambidextrous, 4-position clip, so you don't have to worry about handedness. 3.36-inch blade, so you're in the range you need. HCR, should bring that up. Not the most stainless of stainless steels, but still pretty stainless, but not nearly as stainless as the LC200N we looked at, or even the S30V. So hope that helps. I do have fun looking at those when I do have time to delve into questions like that. So if you keep dropping them in the comments, I might not be able to get to an answer for folks who do that, but they're cool to see nonetheless. But just don't be mad if I'm not able to get to as many of them as I would like. Thank you very much. All right, now we come to the lightning round. Stephen Barabbas asks, why does KnifeCenter feel the need to play music in the background of your videos? So enough people have asked this that I'll let you know why. This is not necessarily an aesthetic choice, but it's purely functional, basically. We do not have a soundproofed set here at the studio. We've got people working right outside our door over there. And sound bleeds in. People walking around, talking, murmuring, that sort of thing. The music helps us cover that up a little bit and keeps it feeling a little less hacky, a little more professional, we think. So that's why we do it.
It's like a nice rug. Really ties the room together.
Really ties the room together, man. I could go for a White Russian now, I tell you what. All right, S. Barnett 37 Tiger Barnes. Must be a hoot when signing birthday cards. I have a folding knife with wooden scales that have warped. Can I perform some kind of steam treatment and clamping to straighten the scales out again? Have you ever attempted to straighten wooden scales out? You could try. It's probably not going to be that successful because chances are if the wood has warped, it may have also swelled, so you're going to have to actually go in and flatten the scales on an actual flat surface with sandpaper if they're actually going to mate up to the flat liners at that point. I'll hold this up as an example here. And once you start doing that, you may not have the clearances you need with the screws when they start to hit, or the other internals, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, I think you're probably out of luck. Somebody might be able to build you a set of scales, or G10 or maybe something like that if you find a nice custom maker. One of the things you can do to kind of avoid this is go with something like Pack-A-Wood, like we'd mentioned on this Indela right here. It is made of natural wood strips veneered together. You can also go with like true stabilized woods, natural woods that have had resin impregnated into them, or go with something like this that is kind of stabilized as well, or some of the woods that don't require stabilization, like desert ironwood, that sort of thing. Especially the stabilized stuff like the Pack-A-Wood here, it's probably amongst the most stable of those. It's less likely to warp and crack, far less likely. It's not impossible, but this is one of the things that, unfortunately, I don't think you're going to have much luck trying to flatten and reattach those scales. But, hey, you're not going to lose anything by trying because they're certainly not usable right now. So, hope that helps.
Don't take them swimming.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. Unless it's a salt series.
No wood scales there.
Or a penguin, like a QSP penguin. They like to swim.
They do like to swim.
But not the D2 ones. Yeah, anyway. All right, now we come to the most serious question of the day, which comes from Mitch Bolig. Most serious question. Why aren't people sharp enough to get the point of knife humor? See, when you're talking about what's going to make something sharp or not, it's all down really to your skill in your delivery of the punchline.
Edgy.
Nice. With a K, K-N-I-C-E. Well, that's all I've got for you right now. Make sure to leave your questions down in the comments. Let me know what you thought of the answers here, or if you have any alternate suggestions for our questioners. And if you want to get your hands on any of these knives, there will be links in the description to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. And don't forget, we've got our Knife Rewards program, because if you're going to be putting your money down on one of these knives today, don't you want to earn some free money to spend on your next one? I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center. That's Thomas behind the camera, and we're signing off. See you next time.